All right, we are live. So, my name is Chris Berry, certified law attorney, certified financial planner with Castle Wealth Group, and we do these wisdom webinars. Try to do every Wednesday. Sometimes things come up, uh, but what we do is we answer any legal, financial, or tax questions that people have submitted either ahead of time or while we're on the call. So if you do have something, a question, feel free to put it in the Q&A if you haven't already emailed it ahead of time. And I do have one talking about Ladybird Deed, so I'll talk about that in just a second. But I always like to start with just positive focus, something positive that happened over the last week or so. Took the family to a Tigers game. So we took them to the Tigers game Saturday. Um, it's kind of funny. None of us actually like baseball, and it was so hot. It was 85 degrees. We were like dying. We actually only watched 2 innings in our seats, but we walked around and we had a good time. So it was a good family time, even though we're not huge baseball people. We go about once a year just to see if we like baseball, and we still don't. So it's good to know. All right, so let's get into it. And again, these are unstructured. There's no PowerPoint or anything. It's just either questions that have come in or kind of thoughts based off of the last week or so. So I saw a recent article talking about some of the risks right now moving into retirement. I thought I'd share that. And then we do have one question submitted with regards to Ladybird Deed, so I'll get into that next. But again, if there's something that you have floating around in your head that you have questions on, feel free to put it in the Q&A and I'll try to address it. So hold on, let me share my screen. All right. Yeah, so I saw this thing about like kind of current risks uh, as it relates to kind of retirement right now. And a couple things that kind of stood out. So the possibility of outliving the money, suffering investment losses, dealing with inflation, facing tax increases, and potential for future reduction of Social Security benefits. So I'll tackle each one of these one at a time. So the possibility of outliving your money, really what we're talking about there is we're talking about like longevity risk. People are living longer than ever these days. And one of the goals, like as an elder law attorney and certified financial planner, is to make sure that your money lasts at least as long as you do. And with regards to the longevity risk, all of these, like it expands on any other risk. So the longer you live, the more you have a chance for long-term care costs. So we need to protect against long-term care costs and that nursing home and Medicaid spend down. The longer you live, the more we have to worry about like taxes going up, especially if you have pre-tax accounts. The longer you live, we need to worry about like market volatility. So we need to make sure that this money lasts as long as you do. So that's probably the number one risk is just longevity risk. Likewise, Social Security, will it be there? Like all like longevity risk really is like the fuel for every other risk. And so the fact that people are living longer than ever, I think that's something that we need to take into account. And the big thing from an investment standpoint is understanding that the way you invest when you're 30 is different than when you're 60 or 70 or 80. Because it's less of an accumulation phase and it's more of preservation and distribution phase. And that's where kind of creating an income plan of how are we going to use these assets to help us make sure the money lasts as long as possible while protecting against the risks of things like long-term care and taxes. It brings it all together. And that's why like really coupling legal, financial, and tax planning all under like kind of one overall plan I think really is the way to go these days versus just having an investment guy, a CPA is trying to minimize your taxes in one specific year, and then someone did an estate plan. Like understand all this stuff when you really think about it, it all fits together. And that's really what we try to do at Castle Wealth Group. Second thing, suffering from investment losses. And I kind of touched upon this. The big concern is what we call sequence of return risk. So the idea is that as you move into retirement, you're going to have to start drawing on these assets. And so the way that you invest when you're 30 in an accumulation phase where you just want to accumulate as much as possible is very different than when now you have to start drawing on these assets. Because if we're drawing on assets that are going down because the market's dropping, we don't have the time to make it up like you did when you're 30. I was having this conversation with some clients of mine who I've known from 20 years from church, and they're talking to one of their kids, and their kids were talking to them about like their investment strategy versus the kids' investment strategy versus the parents' investment strategy, and uh, they're trying to tell their kid that like, hey, like the way that you invest is different than the way that we should be investing, and just because you're in different phases of life. Again, it's the difference between an accumulation phase where you're just trying to save and accumulate as much as possible versus what is that distribution and preservation phase. And that's where we're looking to more things that offer safety, maybe principal protection. The idea is we're not swinging for home runs all the time anymore. Now it's about swinging for singles and doubles. We want to keep up with inflation, see our money grow versus investing in Bitcoin or something like that. So again, investment losses are much more of an issue as you get near retirement because of sequence of return risk. This is a big one, dealing with inflation. Government says that inflation is going down, but if you look at the cost of eating out, you look at the cost of a hamburger, everything is more than what it used to be. And so we want to make sure that your money is at least keeping up with inflation. And especially with where interest rates are right now, if you have a lot of money just sitting in cash, not even a high yield savings account, cash, you're not even keeping up with inflation. Like right now we have high yield savings accounts that are paying over 5% versus if you have $100,000 or 200, or I've seen clients have $500,000 or more just sitting in cash, understand you're not even keeping up with inflation. So we're calling that going broke safely and slowly. There are ways to protect that principal, but still good, at least keep up with inflation. And that might be high yield savings accounts or treasury bills, or there's some other options out there. Next, tax increases. And I think taxes are one of the biggest risks and biggest opportunities these days, just because of the current tax laws. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed in 2017, and it runs from 2018 to 2025. And unless it's extended, understand your taxes are going up 3 to 5%. So especially if you have like $250,000 or more of retirement accounts, you should be looking at some type of IRA exit strategy of paying the taxes sooner rather than later in a strategic way. And also understand we're about to tip $35 trillion worth of debt. So what is the government going to do? Are they going to print more money? That would lead to more of an inflation issue. Are they going to cut spending? Neither side cuts spending. They just spend on different things. Or are they going to have to raise taxes maybe even more in the future? And understand if taxes go up 10%, the value of like your pre-tax accounts, like your IRAs and 401ks, those automatically drop 10%. And that represents 10% of your working years. So I think taxes are one of the biggest risks and biggest opportunities. We just sat down with some clients yesterday, and we put together a tax plan of looking at the different tax brackets and annually getting up to a certain tax bracket, pulling that money out, paying the tax and investing it somewhere else. And we're able to put a lot more into their portfolio and then a lot more into what they're leaving to the kids tax-free, the next generation. Last one, reduction of Social Security benefits. I don't really see them reducing. If you're near or taking a Social Security right now, I don't see them reducing your benefit because there's so many people that are relying just on Social Security. Most of our clients have like additional forms of income where they can draw on their assets and stuff like that. But I've sat down with people where all they had is Social Security. That's their only source of income. And so if they're to cut that, I think the government's creating a lot more problems. Where I see this more is they're going to, because again, like the way Social Security is structured, like it is not solvent. When Social Security was originally started, the Social Security was supposed to kick in at 65. Now it kicks in at 67. That's full retirement age. But the average lifespan back then was 63. So you're supposed to die 2 years before you're supposed to start taking Social Security. So it was like a longevity hedge versus now a good portion of people, a big portion of their retirement is based on receiving Social Security. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to push back Social Security retirement age from 67 to maybe 70 or even later in the future. But I don't see them like cutting Social Security for people who are already receiving Social Security, just because I think there's so much of the population, not necessarily our clients, but so much of the population that all they're receiving and relying upon for income and retirement is Social Security. So, so I don't know. I thought that was interesting. It was part of a recent article I read that really just talked about, from a financial planning standpoint, what are the big issues that retirees are facing these days, or pre-retirees. All right, question coming in, and then here's a question that was submitted ahead of time. Let me copy and paste. All right, and I'm going to share my screen and technology, and boom. All right. So please walk through the details of a Ladybird deed, such as, do you just fill it out, the deed transfer form, have it notarized, important documents after passing? Does the person that the deed transfers from take it to register deeds? If there's no special circumstance, it's a Ladybird deed for any other detail. Okay. Yeah. So big picture, a Ladybird deed, it's named after Ladybird Johnson. Not that Lyndon Johnson or Ladybird Johnson actually did this type of deed. There was just a professor, I think it was down in Virginia. He wrote a treatise, which is like a legal textbook, and he outlined a bunch of different types of deeds, and he just happened to name each deed after some celebrity. The technical term for a Ladybird deed is an enhanced life estate deed. In really big picture, think of the Ladybird deed like a beneficiary designation for real estate. So just met with some clients today. We did a living trust for them that left everything to the kids so that they're protected from divorces, creditors, bankruptcies. We went over funding. So at the end of the day, all their financial accounts should be pointing to the trust. And then for the real estate, we did a Ladybird. The Ladybird deed said it was husband and wife's name while they're alive. One spouse passes away, survivor's still in charge. Either one of them can sell it, they can refinance it, they can do whatever they want while they're alive. But if they still own the property upon death, then it flows into the trust because of the Ladybird deed. Ladybird deed, again, it's like adding a beneficiary designation to real estate. So answering these questions, do you fill out a deed? Yes. So we have to do a new deed and get it recorded. So we fill out the deed, we have it recorded, we file a property transfer affidavit with the township as well. So it is like an official legal document that we have to draft up. After passing, does the person that the deed transfers the home to just take it to the registry? No, the deed is recorded at the time of it's signed. So for the clients today, we signed their estate planning documents. Now we're going to take it to the county to get it recorded right now. Now we're going to take the property transfer affidavit to the tax assessor to notify them that a transfer has been made, but it's an exempt transfer. So it doesn't uncap their property taxes, doesn't do anything from a tax standpoint. So this isn't the, and I saw this yesterday with some potential clients I was just sitting down with. They have an old estate plan, and the attorney did the deed in the drawer trick where they recorded, or they signed a deed, but they don't record it. Really, that's the old way of doing things. There's a lot of problems with that. You have some potential tax problems. You have some potential liability problems. You have some potential penalties of the tax assessor. So no, with a Ladybird deed, it's recorded right away. So everything's above board, pretty straightforward. We probably do like 200 Ladybird deeds a year. Is there are no special circumstances between the parties? Is there a Ladybird deed form for the state of Michigan that be downloaded for somewhere for use? You might be able to find one to download. I've seen a lot of attorneys screw up a Ladybird deed. So you can download whatever you want from the internet, whether it's right or wrong, that's gonna be another question. In fact, clients I sat down with today, who I've known for a number of years, they even had an attorney that drafted up some documents, and it just wasn't good. So yeah, you can download whatever you want from the internet, whether it's right or wrong. That's going to be another question. Any other details you think worth mentioning? No, really, the Ladybird deed, it's a pretty straightforward concept. Like I said, we probably do 200 of these a year. Whenever we do real estate, we're either deeding directly to the asset protection trust or we're doing a Ladybird deed. So yeah, so hopefully that was helpful on Ladybird deeds. Big fan of those. All right. Now, here's the last question I have. So if you do have any additional questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A. Let's see here. Does a trust pay tax on income and dividends that are distributed to the beneficiary? Well, it depends on how the trust is set up. But one of the things that we always try to do whenever we draft a trust is we want to have the income and dividends and tax paid at the personal income tax level versus the trust tax level. So trust taxes, I don't have it right in front of me, but you get into the top 37% tax rate pretty darn quickly. Let's see if I have it right here. Yeah, so right now, if you were to get into the over 15,000 or $15,200 worth of income on a trust that's taxed at a trust tax rate, you're now at the 37% tax bracket. Versus for a married couple to get into the 37% tax bracket, you have to be at $731,000. So just about every trust that we draft, whether we're leaving it to the kids or it's an asset protection trust, we have it taxed at a personal tax level. When we set up asset protection trust, they're what's called grantor trusts, meaning they're taxed at personal income tax levels. And then when we set up even what we call legacy trusts that are leaving this to the beneficiaries, we still have it taxed at a personal income tax level. So I would say, unless we're dealing with estate taxes where you have more than like $12 million of, or $13 million as a single individual, $26 million as a married couple, there'd be no reason that income should be taxed at a trust tax level. And 99.9% of the trusts that we draft are, I would say, are taxed at personal income tax levels, not trust tax levels. Okay. Here's a couple more questions coming in. More on the Ladybird deeds. So here we go. Let's see. Here we go. Let me copy this. All right. All right. So kind of two follow-up questions on the Ladybird deed. I'll just answer them without putting it into the typing it. So this question, just to be clear, the Ladybird deed goes hand in hand with your trust. It depends on the type of trust. So if we're setting up a revocable living trust, then yes, almost every time we're doing a Ladybird deed. So the home is in your name, and then upon death, it flows into the trust, so it avoids probate and goes where it's supposed to be distributed. Ladybird deed versus trust, which is better, completely different tools. A Ladybird deed is only talking about real estate. A trust is talking about like all of your assets. A Ladybird deed can avoid probate with regards to your real estate, but it can't really control the distribution. It can control where it goes, but it doesn't build in the protections that a trust does. So typically we'll set up a trust for all of the assets, and then the real estate with the Ladybird deed would go into the trust. The different financial accounts would all flow into the trust, because the trust is what avoids probate and builds in the protections for the kids or the beneficiaries. Now, if it's a very simple situation, not a lot of assets, really the only asset is a home, then maybe we do a Ladybird deed without a trust, just going to whoever the beneficiary is. But typically we would have both a trust and a Ladybird deed. So it's not one or the other. It's really kind of what are your goals, what strategy, and then picking the right tools. And a lot of times it's both a Ladybird deed for the real estate and then a trust, and then making sure we have beneficiary designation listed on all the financial accounts. So think of the Ladybird deed again, like a beneficiary designation for real estate. And when you set up a trust, you need to make sure all the different accounts and assets are pointing to the trust, because the trust has to be funded. So we would change beneficiary designations for the financial accounts. And then with the real estate, if we're not doing an asset protection trust, we need to do a beneficiary designation for the real estate, which would be the Ladybird deed pointing to the trust. All right, that's it on Ladybird deeds. Yeah. All right, so let me just kind of copy this. All right, so here's kind of a comment on VA benefits, and I appreciate it. Hold on, let me share my screen. All right. Bop, bop, bop. Yeah. So the comment mentioned how valuable veterans help is for veterans surviving spouse. I'm living with that with father and aunt. Yeah. So this is really getting into kind of that longevity risk that we talked about, is that we see people, they don't go from just healthy to passing away, they go through an aging process. And as a certified elder law attorney, like, it's my job to help bring in as many resources as possible to make sure that they have the best quality of life possible. So what we see in terms of that elder care journey of people living at home independently until maybe one spouse needs help and the other spouse is providing the care until they get caregiver burnout. Then now we need to bring in a home care company, which could be $3,000 to $5,000 a month to help provide care, but also provide respite to the caregiving spouse. Then we might transition into needing like independent or assisted living, which could run $3,000 to $6,000 a month. And then we transition to assisted living with memory care, which could be running $6,000 to $9,000 a month. And then we could transition to nursing home care, which could run $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And then especially as a married couple, like if one spouse needs long-term care, we want to make sure the other spouse isn't completely impoverished having to pay for that. And so there's different ways that we can bring in additional benefits to help pay for that cost of care. Because really there's only 6 ways to pay for long-term care. One is we can just private pay, meaning we just spend down our money until we run out. Second, we can have the kids pay. A lot of times they don't pay financially, but they pay in terms of their time, where they're taking time out of their day to sit down with the elder law attorney, or they're putting their life on hold to become a full-time caregiver, right? Third, we can have long-term care insurance, which really we've seen that industry kind of completely implode. A lot of companies have gotten out of the long-term care insurance business. Fourth, we have Medicare, which pays for short-term rehab, but it doesn't really pay for long-term care. Fifth, we have the VA benefit, which I'll talk about. And then sixth, we have Medicaid, which will pay for nursing home care. So the VA benefit is an amazing benefit that's available to veterans and surviving spouses of veterans who meet certain requirements. 90 days active duty, 1 day during a period of conflict, cannot be dishonorably discharged. So I became VA accredited in 2008. So we were dealing with a lot of like World War II veterans at the time. And then there was a lull because there's like a lag in period of conflicts. Then we started dealing with a lot of Korean veterans. And then now we're dealing with Vietnam veterans. And as long as they served 1 day during a period of conflict, they don't have to have seen any type of like war conflict. They just have to serve during that period of conflict. Then they could receive veterans benefits up to about $3,000 a month these days to help offset long-term care costs. But to qualify for that VA benefit, there is an asset test. And so one of the things that we can do as a certified elder law attorney is we can set up a veterans asset protection trust, move the assets into the trust, and then we can get qualified for this VA benefit, which even if we don't trigger it right away, and I appreciate the comments, in this situation, we didn't trigger it right away because we did not have those ongoing long-term care costs. But this benefit's available to both veterans and surviving spouses of veterans, where we can bring in an additional $3,000 a month, which you couple that with their pension and Social Security, and now they can receive the care that they need without maybe touching their assets. And again, as an elder law attorney, like that's always our goal, is to make sure that the individual who we're planning for gets the best care possible. And unfortunately, the system's kind of broken in the sense that the more resources you have coming in, the more assets, the better care you're going to get. So if we can turn on for a veteran or surviving spouse, especially someone that's served the country, and then work with the VA to actually get them qualified for that benefit. Because if you have a loved one, or if you've ever worked for the VA or worked with the VA, you know it's a pain in the butt. But if we can work with them to get that benefit turned on, that can really make a big difference in a lot of families. So that's a really rewarding area where at our firm, we're helping clients kind of achieve that goal of just bringing in some additional funds to help pay for the care that they need. Especially when we're dealing with dementia and things like that, because that's that longevity risk that I talked about. Is like we're doing a good job of keeping the body going. Like 2 years ago, I had a total hip replacement. Met with, like I said, my friends from 20 years ago from church, She's had knees done, hip done, like her heart done. She calls herself the $6 million woman, right? So we're doing a good job of keeping the body going, but a lot of times like dementia in the mind, we haven't really solved that answer. And so that's one of the reasons why it causes families to need this long-term care. So in addition to protecting against like the devastating nursing home care, which can run $10,000 to $15,000 a month, and we can help people get qualified for Medicaid. If you do have a family member that's a veteran or even a surviving spouse of a veteran, understand there's some additional benefits available to help pay for that devastating long-term care costs. So yeah, so I appreciate that. And it's one of the most rewarding areas for us is helping veterans who have served this country. Like I never served, um, nor do I feel like I would even be able to. So it's to help those people. It's a very rewarding area. So, all right, I appreciate that. Let's see. Any other questions? All right. Well, I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the comments this week. Looking at the calendar, we should be good to go for next week. The week following, I will be out of the country and taking a trip for a week and a half to Italy. So that's going to be my future positive focus.